May the 4th, 2025, Star Wars Day, and also my birthday. My birthday, I am 27 trips around the sun, 27 years on this planet, this accursed planet. The last time I made a video on my birthday, it was covering my favorite movie, The Empire Strikes Back, and this year I wanted to do something a little different and actually got the idea for this video from one of my patrons, Alyssa, who suggested that I do a video where I cover each of my favorite films from every year that I have been alive on this earth. I thought this was a great idea. By the way, if you want to message me directly and give me ideas, you can go to patreon.com/MasonIDK for just a few bucks and sign up, get exclusive content, access to the Discord server, all that good stuff. Just throwing that out there. And Alyssa also got the idea to recommend it from Karsten Runquist, one of my favorite film YouTube channels. Not only do I think it's a very fun way to reflect on the history of film from the year you were born, but also to sort of look back on the sort of journey that you've been on growing up through the years, and also look at the time you were growing up, as a lot of film can represent the eras that they came out in. This is definitely one of those videos while making it you sort of get nostalgic, like you look back on a specific year and go, oh my god, I remember all the movies that came out that year. I forgot how many bangers dropped in 2008, for example. And because in any given year you can get so many great films, I'm going to include a few honorable mentions before I move into my specific pick. And of course, this is my specific subjective opinion. I'm not saying these are the best films that came out that year, just my personal favorites of all the ones that I've seen from that year, because again, it's impossible to have watched every single film that's come out in a given year. I don't know if I have the bandwidth to do that or not. And while at first glance I thought this concept would be both easy and fun to make, there was actually quite a bit of challenge in selecting some of these movies. That challenge sort of coming from two different areas. One, that there were so many great films released in some years that it's really hard to pick what your favorite is from one year that had so many great movies. And the other challenge being that some years, well, one year in particular, I just didn't see a lot of the movies that came out that year, and I'll get to it when I get to it, and I kind of just had to go with what I liked most from what I saw that year. And as all lists are, they are subject to change. Maybe one day I'll come back to this concept whenever I've seen more films, because I'm always watching new movies, and maybe I'll come across something that I hadn't seen in any given year and choose that as my favorite film of that year. But as of right now, to get started, there are 27 films for my 27 years of life. I am getting close to 30, and I don't know how I feel about that. Happy birthday to me. With all that beautiful setup out of the way, let's get it started with the year of our Lord, 1998. 1998, the tail end of the 90s and the first year of my existence as a being. And for the honorable mentions here, I actually have the very first movie that I ever experienced in a theater. I know a lot of people may not remember that, and I certainly don't, but my mom and my dad have both told me what the first movie I ever saw in theaters was. I was a few weeks old, and my parents went and saw with me The Mask of Zorro starring Antonio Banderas, which is one of my favorite movies, and I think one that definitely deserves an honorable mention here, because I really do think this is sort of an underappreciated 90s action flick that deserves a lot of the love it got at the time, and even more now considering where action films are today. Other honorable mentions that almost took the spot were The Truman Show, Run Lola Run, and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. But if I had to pick one movie from 1998, you all know what it is, say it with me now, The Prince of Egypt is my choice of film from that year. I've said a lot about this movie on the channel already, but to highlight a few specific examples here, I think this animated adaptation of the story of Moses is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, animated film I have ever seen. The first 2D animated film from DreamWorks, and in my opinion, their finest. Recently, we actually lost the voice actor for Moses in this film, Val Kilmer. His performance, as well as his sort of rival and brother, Ramesses the Pharaoh, in this film, played by Ralph Fiennes, are truly some of the finest vocal performances from well-known celebrities that I've seen in an animated film. Something that I think really stands the test of time in terms of talking about The Prince of Egypt is how each moment, each shot is so dynamically staged. There is a true sense of scale and grandeur to everything that happens here. They let the animation and the shot design sort of punctuate those incredible moments that make you feel like you're experiencing an epic. An epic that belongs right up there with the works of David Lean, like Lawrence of Arabia, in my personal opinion. This is animation used to its fullest extent as an art form, as a medium. I truly love this movie. I've yapped about it forever and ever, and I'm sure I'm not done, but just to get it out of the way here, 1998, The Prince of Egypt, there was really no other option for me. 1999. We are gonna party like it's 1999 up in here. Not only were a lot of great movies released into the world in 1999, but also My Brother, Marshall, was released into the world in 1999. A lot of cool stuff came out in 99 is what I'm saying. And man, what a stacked year 99 was. This is a crazy list of honorable mentions we're about to have here. Fight Club, The Iron Giant, The Matrix, Being John Malkovich, Toy Story 2. With 1999, it was kind of right off the bat where I was going to see the difficulty in making this video, because The Iron Giant and Being John Malkovich specifically almost took this spot, like it came this close, but I had to go with what I truly believe, and in my opinion, the final film of the legendary Stanley Kubrick, Eyes Wide Shut, is the finest film that came out that year. The film follows a successful married couple who begin to have serious doubts in the strength of their relationship after oversharing while getting high. A mysterious and disturbing series of events leads the husband, played by Tom Cruise, to discover a frightening underbelly of the rich elite where hedonism and lust runs amok, while also examining the very nature of relationships, fully devoting yourself to a person, and the limits of love itself. In a career full of very, very dark films, this might be Kubrick's darkest subject matter. Even though this isn't an explicit horror film like Kubrick's The Shining, there is something very eerie about it. Like, everything in this film and everyone in it is putting on a sort of mask, which of course ties into the themes of the film with the Venetian masks. It asks a lot of very heavy questions, like how strong is love? Is physical intimacy as important as emotional connection? How fragile are the relationships that we have once the deepest desires of our partners are accidentally exposed? And I think most frighteningly, do we truly want to know what our partners desire the most in the first place? Obviously, you cannot talk about this film without mentioning the creepy, rich, secret orgy society, which is a strong enough sort of commentary on the hedonism of the rich elite, but also lends itself to the questions that the film is asking, specifically about this unrestrained indulgence in sex viewed as separate from relationship and commitment. I know this film split audiences quite a bit on release, and to this day even splits critics and Kubrick fans like myself. And while many are going to disagree on where this stands in his entire filmography, for me this is an undeniable masterpiece and the last of a great career from one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. The year 2000, Y2K, the conspiracy theories of what was going to happen on Y2K came and went, and nothing really happened, except for a lot of great movies came out. This was a pretty good time for satire films, for comedies, for the birth of the new epic with the first installment of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy coming out, The Fellowship of the Ring. You also had Requiem for a Dream, one of my favorite comedies, Oh Brother Where Art Thou, Michael Haneke's Code Unknown. But I do love a very dark horror comedy satire at the end of the day, and there was really no way I couldn't go with American Psycho. A clever satire that isn't as clear-cut as many pretend that it is. The story of the titular psycho, Patrick Bateman, is one that presents itself as over-the-top as possible, but still manages to work in some nuance to not only the psychology and perception of its main character, but how he himself is perceived in the world that he commits these heinous crimes in. This is a yuppie world, one ravaged by the predators of Wall Street who treat crime as casually as they do sex and drugs. Is it possible in a world full of monsters to truly be acknowledged as a monster when the rich are so frequently bailed out by the very system they benefit from? Is it like murder and assault even happened at the end of the day? While there's definitely a lot to chew on regarding the interpretations of the ending and the actions of the main character in this movie, some that I'm sure is going to incur a lot of debate amongst fans, one thing that is not debatable is how highly quotable, darkly funny, and incredibly performed this movie is. Christian Bale is doing some amazing work here, as many have pointed out, kind of cementing himself as one of the most versatile performers that we have on screen today. He truly understood the assignment and got what this film is, and while many on the internet may misunderstand this movie today, I don't think that hurts just how well crafted and put together this film is. A satire so good that many don't even get that it is a satire, unfortunately. We are in the year 2001, a year that was pretty uneventful. Nothing major happened in 2001. Yeah, another year that was really difficult for me to kind of narrow down my favorite for, with another Michael Haneke film, The Piano Teacher, Alfonso Cuarón's Y tu mamá también, the first Shrek film, a very important animated film, came out that year, and of course, Mulholland Drive, my favorite David Lynch film, a film you probably thought I was going to pick for 2001 if you know me, but I actually ended up going with Studio Ghibli's and Hayao Miyazaki's Spirited Away. There's really nothing like a Hayao Miyazaki film, and there's no Miyazaki film quite like Spirited Away, in my opinion. The adventures of Chihiro through a fantasy world unlike any seen before or since will really make you believe in magic and wonder while you're watching it. It has this ability to transport you back to the fantasies of youth, to that awkward middle ground between being a child and a young adult, where the idea of growing up seemed as fantastical as a bathhouse full of spirits. This is a sort of bittersweet, beautiful symphony of the power of Japanese animation, where each note is precisely placed and each following moment manages to excite, thrill, and even frighten at times more than the last one. The entire time I kept telling myself the first time I watched it, how is it going to top what I just saw? And it managed to do it in each following scene. I know I'm not the only one to observe this, but the train sequence itself is worthy of going down as one of the finest moments to ever grace cinema. With a filmmaker and studio as beloved as Ghibli and Miyazaki, there's a lot of debate as to what is their magnum opus, but for me, I think Spirited Away is uncontestable in that top spot of what they're able to do, what this filmmaker is able to do, and what Japanese animation is able to do. 2002, we've got a lot of honorable mentions here. We have Spielberg's Catch Me If You Can, the horror film May, the first Spider-Man from Sam Raimi, Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers, adaptation, Punch Drunk Love, one of my favorite documentaries, Bowling for Columbine. As great as all these examples were, at the end of the day, I had to go with my heart and pick a film I've talked about on the channel before, Treasure Planet. This comes from that very experimental era of Disney animation, which also includes the highly underrated and underappreciated Atlantis: The Lost Empire, where filmmakers that worked in Disney for a very long time were trying to push the typical sort of formula that Disney had to its limits and do something very different in a very sci-fi action adventure style. This isn't a musical, it's not a film about princesses and princes, not that there's anything wrong with those, but this is just a different kind of film. It's an adaptation that still manages to feel wholly original. It's as whimsical as it is epic. A perfect marriage of sci-fi and swashbuckler about a trove of riches at the core of a mechanical planet, ocean vessels that traverse the stars, a crew of extraterrestrial pirates, but high above all of those other things is a story about a boy finding the father figure that he always wanted, changing himself into the man he was destined to be, and in turn, changing the old scalawag who mentored him into a better person. One who gives up a lifelong obsession for the boy he has learned to love like his own son. If it was only about that space pirate treasure hunt story that hooked me from the very first trailer that I saw as a kid, this would still be one of Disney's very best, but it's in that careful attention paid to that central relationship between Jim and Silver where Treasure Planet goes beyond, becoming a cinematic experience that I put up there with the very best of them. If you want to see me go into more detail on this, go check out my video on Treasure Planet. Welcome to 2003. In honorable mentions, we got Return of the King, the finale of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. We got Kill Bill Volume 1 from Quentin Tarantino. We've got The Curse of the Black Pearl, the very first Pirates of the Caribbean film. Satoshi Kon's Tokyo Godfathers, Lost in Translation, the very classic South Korean crime thriller film Memories of Murder. But I actually went with another South Korean film, the gateway drug that got me into South Korean cinema in the first place, Old Boy, as my choice for 2003. At its core, Old Boy is a story about revenge, a revenge that consumes entirely, setting aside all logic, reason, and even basic humanity to fuel a madness at both ends that rages into a fire that will never truly die. One of the very few films that at its center is able to really understand the damage that revenge can do without coming across as preachy. This is a cruel movie that keeps you engaged with such a sense of style and dark humor, while also simultaneously breaking you down with some seriously one-of-a-kind moments of inhumane torture, both physical and psychological. This surgical screenplay and direction on its own does so much heavy lifting, but the whole experience rests entirely on the performances and how they convey the damage that's being done to the psyches of these characters. Choi Min-sik really does give an all-timer performance in this movie, right up there with the very best of his peers. There are not many films that I can think of that compare to Oldboy, and if you take anything away from this video, it should be to immediately check this movie out if you've somehow missed it, and afterwards check out more South Korean cinema, as I did after watching it. For 2004, our honorable mentions are Howl's Moving Castle, Shrek 2, my favorite Shrek film, The Incredibles, a great year for animation, Spider-Man 2, my favorite superhero film of all time, and of course the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, one of the funniest films I've ever watched. But if I had to go with my favorite film of 2004, we're gonna go with a Charlie Kaufman written film, the first mentioned here, but certainly not the last, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I see this film as a testament to the true power of storytelling, utilizing the medium of film to examine feelings so human through a sci-fi lens. This is a film about a relationship in collapse, examining not only where they've fallen apart, but what made them come together, all while they're getting their memories erased of one another, sadly realizing that they were meant for one another during that process. What the characters in this film are doing is trying to avoid pain, and this film is kind of about the futility of running from pain, the idea that no matter what you do, there is going to be pain in life, and especially in love. And it kind of has this message, at least to me, the best relationships do come from our ability to move past that pain and look toward compromise, look toward trying to better our relationships and better ourselves. And it's done in a way that only Charlie Kaufman could write through his insanely meticulous screenplay and his strange knack for exploring the deepest parts of our humanity through the minds of his characters, in this case quite literally. It really is a love story like none other ever told in film history, and for that I have to pick it as my 2004 film. 2005 was a pretty big year for me as a kid because it was the year that Revenge of the Sith came out. I remember the excitement that I had for that. I'll quite never forget. It might have been the most hype movie of my entire life at that time, and probably ever. Like, I don't think any film I've been hyped for to this day has compared to that. And recently they had the 20th anniversary screenings of the film in theaters, and they made a ton of money. It's really crazy to think that I saw this in theaters 20 years ago. That's wild. A pretty obvious honorable mention for Revenge of the Sith, but also for one of my favorite documentaries of all time by Werner Herzog, Grizzly Man, an amazing horror film, The Descent, Robert Rodriguez's Sin City, some really cool experimentation with style and visual effects going on in 2005. But for my pick for 2005, I'm actually going to go back from that crazy use of visual effects and pick something that does have a style and uses that style to further its message, but it does so in a very stark, realistic way. I've mentioned Michael Haneke already in this video, but it's his film Caché that I'm finally going to pick as one of my favorite films of a given year. Caché is a film on its surface about a couple that is being left mysterious videotapes that are filmed from almost impossible angles of their house and later on moments in their life, and they, as well as the audience, really don't have any idea how these are being filmed. This is a very creepy mystery horror film, and it's made creepy by the fact that it feels so unflinchingly real. This is Haneke's dedication, as in all of his films, to that realism of not having any musical score, not using any crazy camera moves, not wanting the artifice of filmmaking to interrupt the message that he's trying to get across. And that message is made pretty clear on repeat viewings, especially if you pay attention to the news that the characters are always watching and in most cases ignoring, the fact that they're able to separate themselves from the things going on in the world, how we can blind ourselves from tragedy unless we're reminded of it and our own hand in it. That is really the message of Caché. I won't spoil this movie any further, but I will say if you're going into this expecting a standard mystery thriller horror film, you're not going to get one. Just be prepared to be confused at first, as a lot of people are when they watch his films for the first time, but definitely go back and watch it again. It is worthy of that revisit. I'm a big Haneke stan, though he can be divisive, but I love his films. In 2006, Martin Scorsese finally got his Oscar for Best Director for The Departed. Guillermo del Toro gained international recognition for The Amazing Pan's Labyrinth. Sacha Baron Cohen made one of the greatest political satire comedies of all time, Borat. Bong Joon-ho made one of the best South Korean horror films, The Host. James Gunn made another great horror film, Slither. The film Short Bus came out, breaking all kinds of boundaries, and if I had selected this as my favorite film of 2006, I have no idea how I would have gotten away with showing footage of any of it. I don't know how I could have done that without getting a serious strike on my channel. But for 2006, I ended up going with a Christopher Nolan film, and in my opinion, the most underappreciated of Christopher Nolan's films, The Prestige. This is my personal favorite Nolan movie, and I know a lot of people are probably shocked by that considering the popularity of films like Interstellar, Memento, The Dark Knight, even Oppenheimer, but I really think the culmination of Christopher Nolan's non-linear, heavily stylized, mysterious style of filmmaking was done to perfection in The Prestige. A story of two rival magicians who became enemies through a tragedy. This is one of those movies that definitely begs you to watch it twice, especially when you get to the twist at the end that I'm not going to spoil. One of the few twists that I actually was surprised by, like I could not have predicted when I first watched it. Like, this film in and of itself is a magic trick. It is a sleight of hand. It is showing you things and you think you know what you see, but only do you realize at the end of the film that you were actually being misled the entire time. I think there's a great meta commentary that you can make here on films themselves, screenplays themselves being a form of a magic trick. The fact that we don't really want to see how the trick is being performed, that we are eagerly awaiting the prestige at the end of the film, and the prestige, the end of this movie, is truly one to behold. I love this movie. I think it's underappreciated in the entire catalog of Nolan's films, and it's my personal favorite that he's ever made. 2007 gave us There Will Be Blood, it gave us Ratatouille, it gave us Hot Fuzz, it gave us Zodiac, and it gave us a film I've talked about on the channel before, The Man from Earth. Hopefully you're able to watch that, although it did get blocked in a few countries. Sorry if you can't see that video. I think for a lot of people, the choice for 2007 does come down between two movies. It's There Will Be Blood and the one that I ended up going with, No Country for Old Men. My favorite author of all time is Cormac McCarthy, and this is really the only adaptation of his work that I've seen that I think really understands his work. It deals in a heavy amount of silence and nuance. This is not a film where characters wax poetically about their desires and their purposes on this planet. This is a film about very real, grounded people and a lawman, a sheriff who has very idealized thoughts about crime and about the behavior of people, sort of learning that it really isn't like that in the way that he's thought it is. It is a very beautiful deconstruction of the Western, while also being one of the very best neo-Westerns that you can watch. I love movies about very smart characters, and everybody in this film is very intelligent, especially the two sort of main characters of Llewellyn Moss and Anton Chigurh. What can you say about Anton Chigurh that hasn't been said already? Javier Bardem is incredible in the performance. He won his Oscar, very rightfully so. One of the most chilling and terrifying villains ever put on screen. The Coens have always been very good at just telling these sort of southern, dark, gothic stories, and I think this is their opus, if I had to pick one. 2008 was another huge year. We had The Dark Knight drop from Christopher Nolan. We had one of the best documentaries ever made, Dear Zachary, a letter to a son about his father. We had Pixar's WALL-E. We had the first Kung Fu Panda, the debut film from Steve McQueen, one of my favorite filmmakers, Hunger. We had the horror films Lake Mungo and Martyrs, two of the very best ever made. Alas, my favorite film of 2008 is a Charlie Kaufman joined his directorial debut, Synecdoche, New York. When we talk about movies that are one of a kind, Synecdoche, New York is the movie that we're talking about. There is no comparison to Synecdoche, New York. You cannot find me another film in existence that is like this. It tells the story of a man named Caden Cotard who receives a grant to put on a massive theater production and tries to write a play about life itself, creating a small New York in the middle of New York, casting people as real people, taking notes on real life moments and adapting them into a play, blurring the lines between the fantasy and the reality, looking into his own identity, his own relationships, examining the fact that he is going to die someday and there is no way around that. Kind of appropriate considering this video is coming out on my birthday. Joy. This is not explicitly a horror film, yet at the same time, I have never been as thoroughly horrified by some of the concepts in a movie as I have with this film. This is a movie about time, how fast time moves, how we don't pay attention to the speed at which we are moving through life, and every scene has something to pick apart. There is analysis after analysis after analysis of this film online, and you can do that. You can go through and nitpick this movie, or you can just sit back and allow yourself to be absorbed by this story of life, a very bizarre look at the end of a life, at the progression of a life, at the falling out of a relationship, at these decisions on relationships being made way too late. The end is built into the beginning. Everyone's going to die. Synecdoche, New York. That's the movie. Jesus Christ, Charlie Kaufman, what the fuck is wrong with you? 2009 brought us Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Bastards, Wes Anderson's Fantastic Mr. Fox, Disney Pixar's Up, the amazing anime Redline, the highly underrated Moon, Sam Raimi's Drag Me to Hell, and of course the stop-motion masterpiece Coraline. With all of those honorable mentions in mind, I ended up going with Antichrist from Lars von Trier. Von Trier is an insane person, but at the end of the day, that insanity did result in an amazing movie, so I guess that's cool. Probably the most highly stylized film that I'll have in this video. Antichrist tells the story of a couple who end up losing their child and retreat into the woods for therapy of the wife specifically, who is taking it very hard. And a lot of weird things happen at that point. Just gonna come right out and say it, this is not a movie for everybody. This is a very weird movie, but also one that I think is impeccably shot, incredibly acted by its two primary actors, the only real actors in the movie, actually. I'm not even 100% sure what this movie is trying to say, but I cannot deny the feelings that I have when watching it. It feels like watching a dark fairy tale come to life, if that makes any sense. The use of slow motion, black and white, weird CGI animation, and insane violence adds to this very creepy, cursed vibe that manages to also be beautiful in some cases. Yeah, Antichrist is a weird movie, but I can't deny the effect that it had on me. So, Antichrist, 2009. And with 2010, we move into the beginning of a new decade. The first year of a decade that brought us films like Christopher Nolan's highly popular Inception, Black Swan, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, Toy Story 3, The King's Speech, the Coen Brothers' True Grit, Tron Legacy, as I've talked about before. One of the best Batman movies ever made, Batman Under the Red Hood. Seriously, that movie should be talked about more. But for my pick, I ended up going with a film that perfectly kind of represents what the 2010s was about. And that film is The Social Network. It kind of came out at a perfect time when we were starting to move toward a social media dominated culture. And it takes a, granted, highly fictionalized look at the kind of person that would pioneer the social media age. A fictional account of Mark Zuckerberg and the people that he sort of trampled over to get to the top, to become the face of social media at the time. While I certainly have issues with Aaron Sorkin, I cannot deny the incredible dialogue in this film. It is razor sharp and very funny at times. If you pair that razor sharp dialogue with the highly clinical perfectionist direction of David Fincher, you really do get a one-of-a-kind experience that feels like it's moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour and is really intense, even though ultimately it's about a bunch of college kids making a website and getting into legal disputes over that website, but it treats it as the end of the world, and you really feel that epic, grandiose scale, especially when you pair it with the music from Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. One of the most deserved Academy Awards of all time, in my opinion. It's a highly quotable film and a highly rewatchable one, especially now when you consider the path that the social media world has taken us. I think it's very fascinating to look back on this film. In 2011, we had one of the most incredible action films of all time, The Raid Redemption. We had an amazing noir Drive. We had one of the best horror films, Cabin in the Woods. Rango, a video that I have talked about on this channel before. The Pedro Almodovar horror film, The Skin I Live In. And the amazing French drama film, The Kid with a Bike. My choice for 2011 is going to be a filmmaker that I mentioned previously with his debut coming out a few years before this, Steve McQueen, and in my opinion, his masterpiece, Shame. a generational talent of filmmaking, in my opinion. In Shame, Steve McQueen takes a look at a very debilitating, troubling, and painful sexual addict. An addict played by Michael Fassbender, who should have got an Oscar for this performance. I'm not joking. I really have a soft spot for character study films, movies that take a look at a single person and leaves the audience to make up their mind about this person. You can leave this film with several interpretations of who this guy is. In some scenes, you can look at him as a sort of misogynist, looking at women as objects and outlets for his sexual desire and addiction, while in other scenes, you can feel terrible for him. You can see the pain that this addiction is bringing him, his struggles to make a real, meaningful, emotional connection because of his addiction. This film blew me away when I first watched it. I cannot recommend it enough, although be warned, it is a very painful movie to watch. In the year 2012, we had the incredible documentary, The Act of Killing. We had a film I've talked about on the channel before, The Hunt. We got Tarantino's Django Unchained, and we got the film that almost took the spot for 2012, Paul Thomas Anderson's The Master. I was so close to picking The Master, but I ended up going again with another Hanukkah film because I guess I'm a glutton for punishment and sadness for whatever reason, Amor. Throughout history, we've seen a lot of movies about love, specifically elderly love, but none that really analyze the unflinching brutality of what it is like to love someone even though they're heading out, they are leaving this earth and dealing with things like dementia, strokes, Alzheimer's, sickness. It really asks the question of, if you truly love someone, are you going to love them just as you did when you first met them? And are you willing to go through the pain of helping them out of this world? If you've been through the loss of an elderly loved one, this is a difficult film to revisit. I've recently struggled with going back to watch it because of that, and I think the reason that it hits so hard is, again, because of Hanukkah's commitment to utter realism. There is no melodrama here. There is no performances that feel like they don't belong. There is no musical score to manipulate you into thinking that what you're seeing is actually beautiful. It is completely and brutally the portrait of someone dying and someone having to take care of someone as they are dying. As hard as it is to watch, I cannot deny that the filmmaking is perfection and every single performance here is unbelievable. Michael Haneke strikes again, and I'm not okay. The year 2013 brought us Denis Villeneuve's Prisoners, Martin Scorsese's The Wolf of Wall Street, Bong Joon-ho's Snowpiercer, Ida, 12 Years a Slave, and the Coens' Inside Llewyn Davis. My choice for 2013 is Her. Another weirdly prescient film considering the world of AI and relationships today. This is a film about a man played by Joaquin Phoenix who starts a relationship with an AI voiced by Scarlett Johansson. What's funny is that when this movie came out, a lot of people made fun of it, thinking it was kind of silly for this guy to fall in love with this AI voice. But looking at where we are today, this doesn't seem that insane anymore. One of the best things about this movie, I think, is the portrayal of the future in it. Everything seems very grounded, yet at the same time, it does feel like an actual future society. There's no flying cars or crazy things like that, but you do see interesting displays and technology that kind of became how we really do operate now. There's a lot that this movie has to say about relationships and how we follow a narrator, a protagonist, I should say, that is kind of unreliable and how his relationship went. And even if you have a machine, a algorithm that is designed to love you, to be a companion, your faults are still going to seep in, and you may realize that ultimately you have something to change about yourself. Not that you're necessarily a bad person, but you are a flawed person as everybody else is, and even this AI is flawed and has other problems. This is a very fascinating movie that has a lot to say about love and relationships, and it's also a beautifully stylized film with incredible performances by the two leads, Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson. I highly recommend it, but odds are you've seen it already. 2014, oh my gosh, this was a huge year for movies. Look at the honorable mentions here: Interstellar, Whiplash, Gone Girl, Nightcrawler, Birdman, the Lego Movie, It Follows, The Babadook, Creep. Great year for horror, dramas, thrillers, and comedies, everything all around. Just a great year for film. But even against Interstellar and Whiplash, I am gonna go with the film that affected me the most, The Grand Budapest Hotel by Wes Anderson. A lot of people I know look at this film as a sort of madcap, absurd comedy, but I think underneath, as funny as this movie is a message about nostalgia and how even through the hardest of times, like the primary events of this film take place during the overtaking of a country by a fascist regime, we are still able to look back on the hardest moments in history with a beautiful level of nostalgia, a sort of artifice that covers up the dangers of what we were going through at that time because of the love that we had for the people, the friends and relationships that we developed at that time. The Grand Budapest sort of stands as a monument to this nostalgic flashback to a world that no longer is and maybe never was to begin with. There's a great video essay by Thomas Flight that I highly recommend you check out if you want to look more into those themes. But even if you're not someone who picks up on all that when first watching it, you can appreciate the beautiful style of the film, the kind of culmination of everything great that Wes Anderson's able to do visually, the colors, the different aspect ratios, all of the performances are as insanely quirky as you would expect from a Wes Anderson film. I laugh out loud and I also cry every time I watch this movie. I think it manages to do both, and that is the sign of a truly great film and great filmmaker. So 2015 brought us a couple great action films and thriller films like Mad Max Fury Road, Sicario, the best Alex Garland film Ex Machina, Yorgos Lanthimos, who will appear on the list later, brought us The Lobster, Robert Eggers' debut The Witch came out, one of my favorite filmmakers working today. There was a highly underrated thriller called Green Room, and of course Charlie Kaufman came back with Anomalisa, a stop-motion animated film. For 2015, though, I went with one of the most intense experiences I've ever had in a movie theater, and also kind of a bonding experience that I had with my dad. We don't go to the movies together often, but we both went to The Revenant together. For whatever reason, a lot of people, especially on film Twitter, which, yeah, I know it's film Twitter, it's a nightmare, don't seem to really like Alejandro González Iñárritu for whatever reason. I don't really know why, because his direction is impeccable, especially of the great long take, excellent use of wide-angle lenses, and really grounded filmmaking style while getting some of the best performances of the careers of Leo DiCaprio and Tom Hardy specifically. Another great movie about revenge, but not only for a revenge of a father that lost a son, but also this sort of interesting look into colonization and the death of indigenous people and how this prejudice sort of bled into this rivalry between two men, and how Tom Hardy's character viewed Leo DiCaprio and his son's characters as less than human. Really intense action sequences that were amazing to see on the big screen here. This is a movie that really feels like freezing cold when you watch it. Like, I get genuinely uncomfortable with just how cold I know this movie is, and I'm someone that likes the cold. My dad, who I watched the movie with, hates the cold and hated seeing how freezing this movie was, but even he really enjoyed it. It's an intense, thrilling film that I think anybody can watch and get something out of. I like Iñárritu. I like this movie. The Revenant's awesome. 2016 was another heavy hitter year for movies. We got La La Land and Moonlight, both great films, although more remembered for their mix-up at the Oscars than probably anything else. Denis Villeneuve brought us Arrival. The Nice Guys is a truly underrated comedy masterpiece. The director of Oldboy brought us The Handmaiden. There was another South Korean masterpiece horror film, The Wailing. Hell or High Water was an incredible neo-western. The Autopsy of Jane Doe was a great horror film from that year. One of the greatest Godzilla films, Shin Godzilla, came out that year. When looking at all the films that came out in 2016, one that I don't think I see talked about nearly enough is Martin Scorsese's Silence. When looking at the filmography of someone like Martin Scorsese, it's kind of crazy that my favorite film he's ever made is one that came so late in his career. I think Silence is the best movie that Scorsese ever did. Just an unbelievable, thought-provoking examination of the idea of suffering and faith. It's really interesting to see how this film fits in with the overall history of Scorsese's filmmaking career. Something that many, including myself, didn't notice until years later was the connections to religion, even through the most gangster and violent films that Scorsese's made in the past. Silence is a very outward expression of faith, both a criticism and celebration of it. I adore the intelligent dialogue in this film, how even the people that are arguing against our main character do make compelling arguments. This is not a film that exists to spread a propagandistic idea of religion and faith, but is one that chooses to examine it and maybe help you to understand why people find comfort in it through even their doubting of it. It was shot on location and the cinematography is incredible. Andrew Garfield cements himself as one of the most gifted performers working today in this movie. Please check out Silence if you haven't done it. It's my favorite Scorsese film, and it's the most underrated of his entire career. When going into 2017 and looking at these honorable mentions, I thought I had a pretty easy movie picked out from this list. We got Phantom Thread, we got Jordan Peele's Get Out, we got Blade Runner 2049, Baby Driver, Lady Bird, The Killing of a Sacred Deer, one of the greatest comedies ever, The Death of Stalin. I was so ready to pick Blade Runner 2049 or Phantom Thread, but just a few weeks ago, I watched this movie for the very first time, saw that it came out in 2017, and knew I had to go with it. First Reformed. I genuinely cannot believe how much this film connected with me. It actually kind of scared me how much I understood the plight that the main character was going through here. Considering the events that are taking place right now in our world, the story of a pastor played by Ethan Hawke looking at the way the world is going through environmental disaster and becoming sort of radicalized, repeating this phrase, "Will God forgive us?" and even saying someone has to do something. It really struck a chord with me when you consider current events. I'm not going to make this whole video about that, but you know what I'm talking about. I've mentioned this already, but I really love character study and character focused films. I love seeing the psychology of a protagonist. Ethan Hawke gives a career best here. I love the way this film is shot. I love the dialogue. I love the minimalist music. I love everything about this movie. I am so glad that I decided to check this out before making this video and making my choice on 2017. 2018 was pretty groundbreaking in several areas for different genres. We got the very first Spider-Verse film. We got Yorgos Lanthimos' The Favorite. We got Annihilation, another great Alex Garland film. We got Climax, a film I talked about recently. The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. We got the highly underrated films Overlord, which did not get near enough talked about, and the horror film Possum, which also didn't get talked about enough. But a horror film that did absolutely get talked about a lot and deserved it was Ari Aster's Hereditary. This is a cursed ass movie. Like, it feels evil to just watch it. I've ranted and raved about this movie on the channel before in multiple videos, some including Friends. Very rarely does a horror film actually get under my skin and frighten me. This movie did that. I know a lot of people look down on the horror genre as a very cliche and very formulaic type of filmmaking. If you do believe that, please watch Hereditary. It will change your mind. It will actually frighten you, and it will get you thinking about all of its many themes. I know that a lot of people have put this in the category of elevated horror, and while I personally think elevated horror is a bit of a silly term because I do think all horror has value, Hereditary is definitely a cut above so many others. Toni Collette should have got an Oscar, so should have Ari Aster. This is an amazing movie. I've talked about it before. Watch it. Good God, 2019 might have been the hardest to sort through for this video. And I know a lot of you probably think you know what the best movie of that year was, and you're probably right, but I had to go with my heart on this one. Our runners up here are Midsommar by Ari Aster, again, just pumping out another banger. Rian Johnson's Knives Out, Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Uncut Gems, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, Marriage Story, The Irishman, Klaus, Dr. Sleep, and of course, Parasite, which was like, dude, that close to getting it, but I had to go with my heart. I had to go with the movie that I love. You know it's The Lighthouse. Robert Eggers is my favorite director working today, and when the trailer dropped for this movie, I've said this before, but it felt like a movie made specifically for me. This is a Mason movie, a black and white, crazy, homoerotic, violent, disturbing, Lovecraftian horror film with a little bit of Greek mythology thrown in there about two guys in a lighthouse going fucking crazy. Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe are transcendent in this movie. Willem Dafoe gives his monologue about the lobster that blows me away. It's on my shirt right here. You're fond of me, lobster. Robert Pattinson also, even though he does kind of get overshadowed by Willem Dafoe in terms of like the memes and things like that on the internet, Robert Pattinson truly does deserve just as much praise as Willem Dafoe gets here. I love movies where I get so many different things out of them and it never holds my hand or tells me what to think. I love movies that completely and totally dive into their own insanity. The Lighthouse does that. It's one of a kind. This is an amazing movie. Dude, what more can I say? It's The Lighthouse. Okay, coming off of 2019, kind of disappointing to go into 2020 for several reasons. Obviously, there was a pretty big global event that happened in 2020. that really sucked. And because of that, personally, mental health that year wasn't great, and I didn't get out and see a lot of movies that year. There's a lot of films from 2020 that I have not seen. This year was pretty difficult for an opposite reason of the other ones, being that I just couldn't find a lot of great movies that I saw that year. I ended up going with my favorite one that I saw that year. I'm not saying it's objectively the best of 2020, nor am I saying that it's even a masterpiece, but I really enjoyed it, and I've come back and watched it multiple times. I don't have any honorable mentions here, really. The film from 2020 is Tenet. I know this film splits people down the middle in terms of Christopher Nolan. A lot of people see this as Christopher Nolan making a Christopher Nolan movie in a weird way. And while I'm not going to entirely argue that, I still think it was a hell of a good time in theaters, especially at a time that I needed it with COVID and all that junk going around. John David Washington was an absolute blast to watch here. We got Robert Pattinson showing up again. Some really cool reverse filmmaking techniques that were cool. The use of slow motion, great score, and action set pieces. Not the easiest movie to follow, not the easiest movie to understand, and you can even argue that it is not the point to understand it, it's the point to vibe with the movie, and if that's the case, I did absolutely vibe with it. I love this movie for what it is. I love Tenet. It was a great film for 2020. Not the best film ever or my favorite even in this video, but I had a lot of fun with it. Luckily, after 2020, we did get 2021. Theaters were opened again and people were able to go back and watch movies again. But also we got art that reflected on that year of 2020, which gets us our first honorable mention in this video, Bo Burnham's Inside, which I think is a masterpiece in its own right. We also got Dune Part 1. We got The Black Phone, a great horror film. We got Pixar's Luca. We got Titane, as weird as that movie was. We got Malignant, which I will defend until the day I die. We got the stop motion horror film Mad God. We got Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0, this sort of great capping off of Evangelion from its creator. We got Pig, which is my favorite Nicolas Cage performance, and we got my personal pick from the year of 2021, The Green Knight. Someone just inject dark fantasy into my veins. This film is everything, and I do mean that in a literal sense. Like, it's a film about life. It's a film about coming to terms with death. Not in the same way of something like Synecdoche, New York, but in a very different way. In a way where you have to face things with bravery, how you have to accept the fact that you are going to meet death someday in order to live a fully meaningful life. It took a lot of liberties with that original Arthurian legend and managed to make it unique in its own way. Also, it is a visual marvel to look at. This is a movie that feels like a fairy tale. Like, there are events that are happening that do have a central theme, but they feel disconnected in a way that feels like you're just watching a series of adventures by a classic knight. A knight trying to find his bravery, a knight trying to find his story. There are lines in this film that have stuck with me. There are moments that I have thought about for hours. I recently watched it again on a 4K Blu-ray, and it is a stunning experience. Easily my favorite film of that year. 2022 was another groundbreaking year for film with the Oscar winner Everything Everywhere All at Once, an amazing film. We got The Banshees of Inisherin, The Batman, my favorite Jordan Peele film Nope, X, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, Barbarian, Talk to Me, Spielberg's The Fabelmans, and Skinamarink, a film that everybody else is wrong about except me. And with all of those heavy hitters, I still ended up going with a movie that kind of, even though it was celebrated quite a bit, still flies under the radar in terms of today's conversation. I went with Tar. Again, as I've said before in this video now multiple times, I love a character study movie, a film about the breakdown of the mental state of a character, a film that makes us sort of sympathize with someone who is very problematic, a person who you can argue is a really bad person, an abuser and manipulator, but also a passionate person about music. Someone who at some point gave up their soul and a piece of who they are to become this contradictory, hypocritical, very much pretentious version of themselves to pursue a career in music. Not only do I love what this film has to say about art and artists, but I also love what it has to say about the concept of being canceled. One of the few films to really explore that in a way that is genuinely meaningful. It doesn't come across as someone who's annoyed with the idea of being canceled and portrays the people calling out the main character in this straw man way. It portrays everybody as on equal footing with the main character and independent. It is a film that hides the motivations of a lot of its characters, but you do find them out later. One of the few films that I saw from that year where I genuinely had no idea where it was going to go, and a hilarious yet also profound ending that I will not dare spoil. With 2023, I don't really have to go through my honorable mentions because I made a whole video about my favorite films of 2023, so you can see all the films that I picked from that year. But having looked at that list in no particular order, I did end up coming up with a favorite, and that was Yorgos Lanthimos' Poor Things. I have a special appreciation for films that feel like their own unique thing, like they're not trying to be anything else. It is simply being its own beast. Yorgos Lanthimos is a filmmaker that does not give a shit and is doing whatever the hell he wants, but also saying things that are intelligent and meaningful about being a female, about being a woman in the world, how you are essentially born into this world as an object to a lot of misogynistic men, as a sexual object, a sexual being, and how you are taught to be ashamed of that existence when in reality you can embrace it. The feminist readings of this film are very fascinating to me. I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm an expert because, you know, guy, but with that said, there are a lot of things you can pull from the meaning of this film about independence and freedom and feminism, regardless of your gender or sexuality or anything like that. Also, it's a hilarious film. Every performance is so funny, very tongue-in-cheek. Every actor knows exactly what this movie is and plays to their strengths. Mark Ruffalo gives a career best, and so does Emma Stone, obviously. This is a movie I've thought about quite a bit, and one that I'm sure I'm going to continue thinking about for the rest of my life. 2024 is The Substance. You can go check out my video on my favorites of 2024. A lot of you already knew it was The Substance if you've been following the channel. I worship the very ground this film walks upon. It's everything I want in a bizarre body horror film. It's everything I want in a social satire. It's one of those movies that's really difficult to talk about because, again, I don't want to spoil it for anybody who has not seen it. Needless to say, I am amazed that this film got a Best Picture nomination. I could not be happier that that happened. And I'm hoping that that is a sign for the kind of films that are going to get mainstream attention in the future. And 2025, well, 2025 isn't over yet, but so far it's easily Sinners. Go watch Sinners. I've seen it 4 times now, and that's pretty good, but I'm hoping to see it at least like 10 more. So that's my video on my favorite films from every year that I have existed. I am going to go have a nice birthday dinner with my family now. I want to thank everybody for supporting me on Patreon, for subscribing to the channel. Shout out to all my patrons, the beautiful names you're going to see on your screen right here, wherever I put them. My executive producers, Lapis Lazuli, VA, and Lizard Gang. A few people joined the Patreon from the last video. Welcome, so happy to have you. Again, be sure to join so you can get exclusive content, and also you can recommend ideas for videos like Alyssa did for this one, and you can message me on Discord. Message me or let me know down below what your favorite films from every year that you've been alive are, and I will see you in the next video next week. Thank you so much. Take care.